Pearl Hart was born in April of 1871 in the lumber community of Lindsay, Kawartha Lakes, Ontario, Canada. There is some debate about her upbringing and surname. The turn-of-the-century papers wrote of her family moving to Toledo, Ohio, before her 10th birthday, and that her name may have been Hartwell, Davy, or most likely Taylor. But by age 16, she fell for a man some say was named Frederick Hart, described as a delinquent, drunken gambler. She had told the papers, "I fell in love with a man in town where the school was situated while still at boarding school. I knew nothing of marriage and eloped." They had an on and off relationship and went from Phoenix to Tucson and back east again. They had a boy and a girl who ended up living with Pearl's mother and sister Katie, who had relocated to Ohio. During better times, Pearl and her husband attended the Chicago World's Fair in the fall of 1893, where her husband took work as a midway barker. Meanwhile, Pearl was fascinated with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, especially their feature act, Annie Oakley. But more abuse came, and this time it would be final, and Pearl left her husband on a train bound for Trinidad, Colorado. There is speculation she rode with and may have been inspired partly by the stories of a piano player named Dan Bandman. It should be noted that some believe it was her husband leaving for war that sparked the move, and Bandman was not as involved in the affair. But nothing was straightforward about the trip, and she labored as a cook and possibly soiled dove. It was the time of her life she avoided talking about, but she did find time to sing and entertain if that was ultimately her goal. The ruckus saloon environment led her to smoke cigars, drink excessively, and drown out her sorrows in opium. At 27, she was reported to be working as a cook in Mammoth, Arizona. If all was well, it was short-lived as the mine closed, and she received a letter to return home immediately to her dying mother. Pearl met a man named Joe Boot who worked on a failing mining claim. The story goes that she told Boot her predicament to raise money to visit her mother. They knew of a stagecoach that traveled between Globe and Florence, Arizona, and set out to rob it. Historically speaking, the temperature was in the 70s that day on May 30th, 1899, when at 5 p.m. the coach rolled up to the watering hole at Cane Springs Canyon to freshen up the horses. They all knew it would be another 8 to 10 hour journey as they wanted to stretch out and look to relieve themselves. Pearl knew it was one of the last coaches to operate in the territory, and having not been robbed in several years, lacked a shotgun guard. Pearl, who was calling herself Dan Goodridge, was armed with a .38 revolver and dressed in men's overalls, top boots with a short haircut, while Boot stood with a Colt .45, and according to rumor, he was hesitant and needed coaxing. "All you have to do is keep your gun straight and keep quiet. I'll do the rest," Pearl said. They sprang from behind a bush and they called out, "Hold up there!" Boot watched the driver and passengers, who left 2 guns, and Hart collected the loot as they were made to line up for inspection. As one resisted, Pearl shouted, "Cough up, partner, or I'll plug you." They robbed a little over $450, including a gold watch, about $16,000 today. Pearl gave back $1 to each passenger, but took the driver's revolver in exchange. The stagecoach left for Riverside, where they planned a pursuit, and Pearl and Joe headed to Benson in hopes of escaping by train. Sheriff Truman caught up with Pearl and Joe 6 days later as they camped just 20 miles away from Benson. Like by a surprising alarm clock, they woke up to yelling and gunshots, and Joe held up his hands as Pearl struggled to escape. Her guns, though, were far away, and Joe went easy. They were taken to the 2nd Pinal County Courthouse at 135 Pinal Street in Florence, Arizona, a building that still stands today. While Boot stayed behind, the court moved Pearl to Tucson, where a woman could be held. Here she said she would never consent to be tried under a law she or her sex had no voice in making. Although she was not the first, considering Belle Starr was known to rob stagecoaches back in the 1870s, the timing was right for Pearl to make national headlines for the crime. Her photograph was taken, and an article written in the Cosmopolitan insisted she was just the opposite of what one would expect of a woman stage robber. Yet when angered or determined, hard lines show about her eyes and mouth. Fans gathered outside the jail waiting to see her, and one dropped off a bobcat cub for her to keep as a pet. With the guards distracted by the chaos around her, Pearl studied the building's weak points and made her escape on October 12, 1899, cutting an 18-inch hole in the wall. She was apprehended shortly after, and Joe and Pearl went to trial for the robbery. Pearl's plea was impassioned, standing by her claim she needed the money to visit her dying mother. It must have worked, as the jury found her not guilty and the judge, in shock, demanded a retrial. Immediately after the acquittal, the pair was rearrested on the charge of tampering with U.S. mail. They were convicted during their second trial, with Pearl getting 5 years and Joe taking 30. This time, Pearl and Joe were sent to Yuma Territorial Prison, where Joe drove supply wagons to chain gangs outside the prison walls. Close to 2 years in, one of these drives led to his escape and eventual disappearance. Pearl continued to receive admiration and became a favorite of the warden. She was given the largest cell with a small yard where she could pose for pictures and speak to reporters. Pearl took advantage of the guards and the prisoners for her benefit, having been smitten with her. Her sister Katie also fed off her celebrity, preparing a romanticized play about Pearl called The Arizona Female Bandit. In December of 1902, she was pardoned by Arizona Territorial Governor Alexander Brody, who may have also fallen under her charm, or at least the pressures from her fans, as someone, too, footed the bill for a train ticket to Kansas City, and she was well on her way. But in reality, her release may have been due to a smallpox outbreak in the prison. Pearl mostly lived out of the spotlight the rest of her days, with a few petty crimes, a performance reenactment, and lectures about the horrors of Yuma Prison. She was also destined to circle back and take part in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, which she did under an alias. This has been Biographies of the West. My name is Lorin Morgan-Richards. Thanks for watching.